objects. They are really powerful data structures. And as you can see, it's the second data structure that we're going to learn in JavaScript. And as a matter of fact, they're also a JavaScript type. Objects are collections of property. Well, what does that mean? Let's take a look by trying to write an object. So to write an object, I can have something like a user and curly brackets. And within this, we can say name equals John. I can say age is 34. Hobby is soccer. And maybe we can even put is married to false. And the comma at the end here, I can leave it off or add it. It works both ways. But now, if I save this and refresh, let's see if we have the user object. Yep, looks like we have name John, age 34, hobby soccer, is married, false. And you see over here that we have an object. And it looks a little bit different from an array, doesn't it? Because if we remember, an array looked like this. Apple, banana, orange. So an array, if we refresh, we have user that looks like this and a list that looks like this. If I open this up, we see that we have a bit of a difference because an object is more dynamic. I can have properties and value. So property name, value John. Property age, value 34. With an array, we had an index 0, which held apple, and an index 1, which held banana. Interesting. Okay, but how do I grab properties? Because with an array, I could do list, grab the second element with 1, and I got banana. Well, with objects, what you can do is you can say user.name, John, user.age, 34, user.hobby, soccer, and user.ismarried, false. Okay, now with an array, we had methods like pop or push to change the array. We even had concat. How can we add properties to an object? Well, very simple. All we have to do is say something like user.favorite food, and I'll do equals, and I'll do spinach. Now, if I look at the user object, I have favorite food, spinach. So we've just expanded the user object. What about this? Can I change to is married to true? Let's say our friend John over here just got married. Well, now if I go to user, I have is married to true. Very cool. So you see the difference there between an array and an object. Now, one question you might be having is, why isn't an array a JavaScript type, but object is? Well, because in simplified terms, technically, an array is just something like this. We even saw it when we looked at the list that we have 0 equals to apple, 1 equals to banana, and 2 equals to orange. And you see what the power of data structures are in JavaScript. That idea of a desk drawer. And in that drawer, you don't want to have a mess. You don't want to just put one thing. You want to have multiple things, but you want them organized. So maybe you want the pens all organized in a section and the files organized in a different section. And as I mentioned, data structures help us organize things better. So for example, an array is really, really good at maybe containing a shopping list or a to-do list. But an object might be really, really good at containing something like user information. So if you think of a game, let's say you're building a game where you're controlling this wizard. Well, this wizard, how tall the wizard is, how powerful it is, how many experience points it has, well, that would be really, really good to put in an object because that wizard is an object. We need properties and values. But maybe the spells, that could be a list because we can just have a string of all the spells that the wizard would know. So does it mean that we can have arrays inside of objects? Yeah. If the user was a wizard, I can put spell or spells, and I can do an array of all the spells. Abracadabra. Or Shazam. Or I can do boo. So now I have an array inside a user. Okay, what about the other way around? Can I have a user inside of an array? Well, yeah, you can. Let's say we wanted to have a list of users of our app or our website. We can have a list of objects where we have username, Andy, who has password, secret. And we can have username, Jess, that has the password 123. Let's see this in action. I'm going to refresh and say list. And look at that. Within this list, I have the first item with username and password, and the second item, username and password. So lists are really, really good at, well, making lists, and those are arrays. And objects are really, really good at containing objects. But how do we access them now? Well, let's look at the user first. If I wanted to access a spell, well, I could do user.spells, and I'll get an array back. But if I wanted to, let's say, access Shazam, well, I would just do user.spells. And then because it's an array, I'll get the second item by using one, Shazam. The other way around, for the list, I can say list the first item, which is Andy, and I want to get his password. Well, I'll do password. And now I get, well, Andy misspelled his password. It's supposed to say secret, but we get secret. So that's how you access things. Okay, one other question that I have. What if I wanted to say that this user, John, who's a wizard, also can shout? Maybe it can do some sort of an action. Can we add a function to an object? Yeah, we can. All we have to do is do function, and you see the color changed, means we're doing something right. I can say function console.log shouting ah. Let's save that and let's see that in action. User. Make sure that we have the shout there. Yeah, and look, it has the F for function. And now if I go user.shout, and remember I have to call the function, I get ah. Very cool. So I can have functions inside objects. And one thing you might notice is, hold on a second. I thought functions were supposed to say something like, alert. But this one we have user.shout. So this is a little bit different than what we've seen before. And this is actually called a method. And this is another terminology that we're going to learn, but a function inside an object is a method. So I can say that shout is a method of user. Just like with an array, like lists, and if I do pop, well, pop is a method of list. And another thing that you might have realized is console.log. What do you think log is that we've been doing all this time? Well, console, as it turns out, is just an object. Do you see that? Console has all these, looks like method on it. So this entire time we've just been doing console log, but I can also do, let's do info. If I do console.info, and I'll say hello, well, I get hello, nothing changes. But what if we do something like error? Well, I can do console.error. And now, look at that. I get the error. So that's what methods are. They're functions inside an object. Okay, I have one last cool thing to show you. And that is, can I do something like this? Can a user be an empty object? Yep, it works. So if I get user2, I just get the empty object, and there's nothing really in it. Okay, what about erase? Can I do a list that is empty? Yep, I can do a list that is empty. But as you can see, I can't really use any properties in user2 because, well, it has no properties. And I can't really access list0 or list20, which is the empty one, well, because there's nothing in it right now. So this reminds us of when we don't declare a variable, we get undefined. But with an object and a list, we can have something empty and it's not undefined. But there is one thing I want to show you. There can be an empty object. So if I do var empty object, well, it's an empty object, but there is something called null. And that is our 6th data type. And null is a special type that just says that an object is null. So let's see what that means. If I look at empty object, I get an empty object. If I get a null object, it returns null. So this is a special character that we'll get into later on in the lessons, but it just means that there is nothing in this object. If I go null object dot name equals Andy, I can't set property name of null. But if I do that for an empty object, which is just an empty object, well, I can say name equals Andy, and look, I have Andy. So that's what a null object is. It is empty, completely empty, and well, right now it kind of looks useless, like we don't need it, but I'll show you cases where this is important for us. Okay, that was a whole lot of stuff, but you've actually learned so much in JavaScript. This is pretty much, I would say, 80% of what you need to know in JavaScript to work professionally. And it sounds like we didn't cover that much, or maybe to some it may feel like we covered a lot, but in terms of syntax, just looking at this, we've only learned a few words and a few ways of doing things. With this newfound power, I'm going to show you how we can build a simple Facebook with what we just learned. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.